All right, here we go. It's week 3. DFS Army, NFL, Players Club, VIP podcast. My name is Kevin Allen. You've seen me all week. The Wolf Pack. The Vegas Lines podcast. I did a breakdown of lineup building on FanDuel earlier today. And now we're going to talk full slate, Players Club, one of my favorite slates of the year. Really, really lots of ways to go. So let's do this.
I run my own and I'm my own self-person. No respect, make the situation worsen. Feel more HP than Sunnydale. There's a Players Club everywhere you dwell. Lakeview, PH, and Army Street. A different part of town, a different kind of freak. I just wiggle my toes on a mink rug and press play on remote at the Players Club. Me and my homies, we tied it in the glove.
Right. Let's get this going. Week 3, everybody. All right. Just before I even start to get into the player breakdowns, you know, this is a crazy week because there's so many games to pick from, so many close odds games. I'm just going to bring up this screen real quick here. You can see this on the Dom station too, but just look at these numbers. Like nothing stands out. Usually we'll have 2 or 3 games showing this type of 50-plus point projection, but we really don't have it this week. We've got a Tampa Giants game, 48 points. You've got this Chargers-Houston game, which doesn't necessarily have a ton of fantasy goodness projected for it at 48.5. And then everything's sort of a step down. You have a couple of these massive spread games where it looks like a bigger number than it is because all the points are coming from one side. Really, really interesting. So the result of this is a lot of possibilities and a lot of ways to go. And I really like a week like this because there are a lot of cheap players, more than I could even... My list this week is crazy, especially at the... and it's been expanding. I've never had so many wide receivers that I consider to be in play. And I'm really playing it from what we learned in this offseason, where wide receiver chalk is scary chalk. We don't want to get too crazy with it. I'm pointing out this Nelson Aguilar play here as one of those scary situations where you see a guy who's been around, okay player, not the best matchup in the world, coming off a big game, lots of recency bias. Now we're going to have 25% ownership on a $3,600 player on DraftKings. And my first thought is like, there's got to be alternatives to this. And there are. So it's really interesting as far as that goes. Same thing at the running back position. There's a lot of studliness when you pay up. But there are other options that are really interesting paying down in tournaments, some of which have just as much upside. So we're going to go over these running backs and which ones to really, really target and which ones we can sort of maybe get away from a little bit. Everybody's Mark Core, but there are different levels to this. And I'm going to cover all of that. There's also a lot of quarterbacks potentially in play, even more than what I have listed on my sheet. I mean, partially, when you look at how I set up the quarterback position, and you see you have Mahomes and Lamar Jackson up top. Obviously the best plays. But there's a lot of things that are interesting just below that. Now, the reason I don't have every single or all these quarterbacks on a list is because at some point they're a little too close in price to guys that I'm going to end up paying up for. Like, do I have a problem playing Dak here? Absolutely not. He's a good play. Deshaun Watson, of course I don't mind playing him. He's great. There's Deshaun frickin' Watson. You know, he put up 30 points on week 1. Aaron Rodgers, playable. Like Josh Allen. Kyler Murray I like a lot. So there's a lot of players that I like here. But, I mean, even going down, Matt Ryan, Phillip Rivers might be in play. Carson Wentz, I've heard his name bandied about. But, you know, coming down lower, like Jameis Winston, why not? Why not? Oh, because he's only scored 10 and 13 points in consecutive weeks? Well, that's a reason, but eventually he'll have a good game. Kirk Cousins, dirt cheap. If you play these guys, I don't have a problem with it. So we can't cover every single thing, but if you're mass multi-entering, and let's say you don't want to kind of go heavy on a couple of different spots, there are so many areas here where you can stack it up. And the beautiful thing about stacking up different games and contests, and I talk about this all the time when you're mass multi-entering, in particular you're making tournament entries. When you bring in a different quarterback and you stack him with 2 of his pass catchers, as we try to do with every single quarterback that we use, especially in a tournament, we stack him with 2 of his pass catchers, what happens is that ends up changing the mix of that lineup compared to a lineup with another quarterback. So people don't fully understand why it's done. It's not just because we want to stack various games because they're going to score high or they're projected high. What you're trying to do is create a mix of lineups, of entries, where there's some diversification in the mix that you're putting out there. So, if I'm making, let's say, a Jameis Winston lineup, right? And he is definitely not even on my list, but playable, right? But he's not on the core plays for me this week. So, I look at Jameis Winston, I'm like, all right, Godwin's up here, Mike Evans is down here. I'll play one of these 2 guys with him. The Giants suck against wide receivers. It's a cheap starting 2. And, it gets me on different. Now, maybe I want to use both of those guys. Or maybe it ends up bringing me on because I want my quarterback with pass catchers from his team. Maybe it brings me on to someone like O.J. Howard, who I otherwise would not have any interest in owning. We don't like O.J. Howard. He screwed us the last few weeks, right? But whatever. It's Giants. Takes me on to some different players. Maybe I want to bring it back with Sterling Shepard because I want a whole piece of that game. Like I usually bring it back with someone. Maybe that means I'm bringing it back with Saquon Barkley. Or maybe I'm bringing it back with Sterling Shepard from the Giants or Evan Ingram from the Giants. So when you game stack and team stack and game stack, what ends up happening is each lineup has this sort of uniqueness. We still build around our core. We still have players which we like a lot, but it will get us off these duds that will landmine blow up your lineup. So when you're making a lot of them, you need to hit every single spot. Now, one of the things I always try to explain, and this is, again, very, very important, there is a difference between a cash/hybrid lineup where you're trying to beat half of the lineups you're up against, or you're trying to beat, in the case of a hybrid lineup, 30 lineups or 60 lineups or 150 lineups in a tournament, where you don't have to get that cute. Like, sometimes you can hit a landmine and still win that contest. Or not a landmine, but you don't have to hit the perfect play in every spot. So a 0 is not going to work, but if you didn't get 30s out of every bit, you don't need to score on DraftKings a 225-point score to win that style of content. You could win with a 190. Now, what's a 190? It's a very good lineup, but you might have a dud in there, or you might have somebody that didn't work that well. It's very important because people don't understand it. I say this every single week. I say it on every podcast. You guys aren't going to listen. I understand that. Some of you will. The ones that are listening, you guys will be profitable by following this and understanding this. There is a massive difference between attacking a tournament when you're putting up 150 and you need to be perfect everywhere. And there you can't afford not even a real landmine, but even a mediocre or just an average game out of any of your spots. You need above average performances from everything to win a massive tournament. Everybody, you need above average. That's different from a cash game. You don't need to have above average performances out of everyone. Last week I won cash games with Alvin Kamara in my lineup. He got like a 6 or a 7. I won all my cash games with Alvin Kamara. Why? He was high owned. Everybody else in that contest owned him. And it was a low scoring week last week. So being smart about the quarterback, because locking in some points at quarterback and some points at running back at a couple spots, Austin Eckler. I don't remember who it was. If you want to go back and check out the week in review, we have that. But I was able to cash in all of my cash games for that reason. That kind of lineup, the one that I had, which barely kind of snaked the edge of the cash line, just squeaked by a couple points, that wasn't going to be good for ladders. I think I scored like 140 on DraftKings or something like that. It wasn't quite enough. But it doesn't take much more than that to cash in your ladders in certain weeks. And don't pay attention so much to the total score. It's irrelevant. Weeks go a certain way. When the chalk fails, the week is a low-scoring week. When the chalk crushes, and I'll talk about some chalk plays that if they crush, it will automatically be a high-scoring week this week. You could tell because when you look at the domination station, they are clearly laid out for you. So my overall view of the slate is, especially at the running back, I mean, there's so much variety here. It's very difficult to hone in. So I'm going to be playing a lot of ownership in my tournaments. It's very difficult to hone in on some spots, and I'm gonna give you some sneaky plays. There's so many wide receivers that I'm interested in this week, and there are some situations that we're monitoring that I actually could barely fit them all on the list, and I do not try to do that. I try to give you, as often as possible, a tightened down list of players to choose from. And obviously, I'm going to pop that up here, but, you have your best plays. They're Mark Core and all and whatnot. But sometimes there's a warning in the notes about a player. So I know a lot of people don't like to read the notes. It's just like, let's look real quick and see who's here. But please read them and understand some of these nuances, because some players marked all have big concerns as well. But sometimes they're an all play, but, play at your own risk. So Nelson Aguilar comes to mind. We'll get to him when we talk about wide receivers real quick, but very big list, and I'm liking certain players more. There's some injury situations that are sketchy. There are some players who are more cash game than tournament game that I want to talk about here. So there's a lot to discuss, and there's some great tournament plays that I don't think a lot of people are on. Ownerships are very interesting this week. Let's jump into it. Quarterback position. So the first game that stands out on the slate is, of course, Baltimore, KC. 52-point total. KC at home, slight favorite. What could go wrong? And the reality is, not much can go wrong here. This is a really, really good spot for both of these teams. Now, Kansas City defense at home is significantly better than they are on the road, so that's something to keep in mind. And Baltimore defense is, quote-unquote, good, so that's something to keep in mind. Baltimore does have the ability to slow a game down. They can run it. They could keep the ball out of Mahomes' hand. We saw them do that in the playoffs. Use that approach. So there are some flags here. There's a reason that this game, when it opened, the line shot up to 55, then it went down to 51. Now it's floating at 52, 52 and a half. There's been a lot of line movement here because there's I guess, controversy or disagreement, quote unquote, among the sharps as far as how this game is going to go down. Could be a high-scoring Rams, Chiefs 2018 explosion. Could be something else. Could be a running game for Baltimore. Maybe they come out and they try to slow it down. I don't know if they're capable of doing that, but I guess they could. Just defense and running and long, slow drives. Mark Ingram. That could happen. Keeps the ball out of the hands of the KC offense a little bit too much, or more than you'd like. Could happen. Neither team doing a ton of scoring early. Could happen, right? So even though a lot of the focus is going to be on that game this week, there's nothing wrong. They're very expensive quarterbacks. Both quarterbacks, I think, are going to do great no matter what happens. But we are paying up with these two teams for what they've done the last couple of weeks. They should do more. They should do more of the same, but the affordability is not spectacular. Now, that said, who are some potential stacks? Now, the first thing I want to do with a game like this is I want to game stack it. I want to stack the shit out of it. So the lineups that have exposure to this game, I want to get all kinds of different versions of exposure, right? So with Lamar Jackson, it's fairly easy. There's only really 3 players that he could even possibly be stacked with, and 2 of them have been getting all the work, and the third guy has not. Now, I don't want to pair up Lamar Jackson with an Ingram because Ingram gets no passing game work, or he's gotten no passing game work for the most part. 2 targets over the course of 2 games. So if Ingram is scoring touchdowns, those are touchdowns Lamar Jackson is not scoring. So I will disallow any sort of combination of Lamar Jackson and Mark Ingram. No, we don't want him. Instead, the guys who have been doing well are Hollywood Brown and Mark Andrews, the tight end. Now, Hollywood Brown, he looks good. I like him here. Marquise Brown, 13 targets last week. Are you kidding me? Even with that, only 16.6 points. The salary went up a little bit. He'll be chalky, but there's a hesitancy amongst the DFS community to play guys like this when they get priced up. Like DraftKings probably did a pretty sharp move here, pricing him up, because there's going to be hesitancy. So his ownership is probably not going to be as crazy high as one might think. Right now we have him set up for, let's say, only 7%, 7.5% ownership. So that's low enough that, okay. Mark Andrews, the tight end, appears to be the favorite target of Lamar Jackson, and certainly the most efficient throws. 9 targets, 8 receptions, 8 target, 8 receptions. He's been very efficient. 100 yards both games, scored a touchdown both games, has been a monster. Can you believe this guy was 3K week 1? Man, that was crazy. 4,600, still very playable. Now, I want to bring it back around, and we can also talk about Mahomes stacks. So we want to bring it back around / have our stacks with Mahomes. The Mahomes stack's the same deal. We want to get pretty much Andrews and Brown in there. Boykin is the other guy. Hasn't done anything. He's a rookie. Looked really good in the preseason. Eventually, this guy's going to break out. But he's one of these guys that I don't mind, getting a little exposure to. Eventually, he's going to have that breakout. It's not a cash play, but, he's out there a lot. He's playing more snaps every single week. It's just a matter of time before Miles Boykin has a big game. It could be this week. Now, on the flip side, we've got Pat Mahomes. And, he's a beast every single week, 30, 35, does this kind of thing. Even against Jacksonville, good defense, put up 30 points. So if you want to lock in 30-ish points, that's what you play Mahomes. You're very close to locking in 30 points. The sacrifice is you can get pretty close to similar kind of potential, or 20 points for a couple thousand less. I think Lamar Jackson has just as much chance of putting up 30 points as Mahomes, or maybe slightly less, but it's a lot of savings. Dak Prescott. So when you pay up at quarterback, you're going to sacrifice elsewhere. Sometimes it's worth it, sometimes it's not. But you have to sacrifice elsewhere to get it. We'll talk about where I don't want to sacrifice. And there's some things here. There's so much going on in this slate. It's unbelievable. But we're going to stack Mahomes with the pass catchers from KC, Andrews and Brown, or one of those guys, and we want to pair him up with 2 of his pass catchers. Kelsey, Sammy Watkins, who I love the most out of the group this week because he's the most expensive. And he's getting a ton of targets, and he had a dud last week. Love that. He's not too expensive. 6,800, came down from last week. 13 targets, 6 receptions. So he was targeted the most by far out of any wide receiver on his team. And yet, no one likes him this week because everybody wants to talk about those cheaper guys. Mecole Hardman and Robinson, D-Rob. Mecole Hardman, yeah, okay. 6 targets, 4 receptions. Cool beans. Nice work last week. I'll play him, get him in the mix. Robinson went nuts last week. 6 targets, 6 receptions, 172 touchdowns. That's just what you can do in this offense. But Watkins remains my favorite of these guys. Kelsey and Watkins. Watkins just gets the most, has gotten the most targets, got the most targets, 11 week 1, 13 week 2. He didn't do that much in week 2. Recency bias will have people off of him. That is a good situation for us. So stack it up with that game. Now, that being said, I don't mind these pieces of one-offs, but when you stack this game and you set up a lineup this way, you can't afford the stud running back. So you need to pare down the running back position. We'll talk about the running back position when we get to that point, but you need to pare down the running back. You really can't stack Mahomes with Kelsey and also still have like a Zeke and a Dalvin Cook or a couple of stud running backs. You have to make sacrifices, and there aren't that many great super pay down options at running back this week. There are some great middling options that I think will go under owned, and I like those in tournaments. But like I said, we'll get to that when we talk about the running back position. All right, other QBs. So going through my list for this week, because I'm trying to narrow it down a little bit. I don't mind Josh Allen at 5,900. He's at home. The Bengals defense, the worst or one of the worst in the league. Allen has been great. I've played him every single week so far. I had him ranked like so much higher than everybody else. In my season-long rankings, the only guy who I was more out of touch with in terms of the marketplace was Lamar Jackson, who I had at number 7 overall. And, you know, outside of the DFS Army League where the other staff all took him, tried to grab him before me, every other league I'm in, I have that guy because he was available until the end. But Josh Allen, couple of nice games. 20 points. That's what you can expect out of him. So it's like, all right, if I shave off $1,000, shave off 10 fantasy points compared to Lamar Jackson. Have to say, Allen does have upside to get to 25 or even 30, so he can reach the numbers that those other guys can get for 1,000 to 1,500 more. He has 30-point upside. That could be it this week because the Bengals are one of the worst defenses in the league. I mean, Miami Dolphins level. So it could happen, but it's much more likely to happen for Lamar Jackson, for example, against the Chiefs. So that's the whole thing. It's like, I can get probably 25, 30, and certainly Pat Mahomes. So Allen, slightly less chance of hitting that ceiling than a Jackson or Mahomes. A little scary. You can't really double stack him or team stack him. The only player that's really been producing for the Bills has been John Brown. Love John Brown. Always love John Brown. Sheriff. Cole Beasley's the other wide receiver for that team. Meh. Hasn't done anything. He could do something, but he hasn't done anything. But those are your stack mates. I'd probably do a single man stack. And I don't really like the comeback on Cincinnati very much. Not too much to like on the Cincinnati. Obviously, John Ross has been doing really well in Cincinnati. But, you know, they are the Bengals. Very bad offensive line. So, not in love with the comeback or game stacking that one. But one I do love a lot, and I do want to game stack quite a bit, is the Cardinals versus the Panthers. Now, it's an interesting one because when you look at Cardinals-Panthers, only 4.5 point game total. This looks like what's going on here. That's not a great total. So you can't go too crazy with a game with such a low total, especially with the spread being close. That means that both teams are projected to score about 20 points. So it's like, what's going on here? Murray's been involved with 2 games so far. There's a lot of plays going, but the most impressive thing has been, you know, the improved passing, the improved passer rating. Not a whole lot of rushing going on. But I love the attempt numbers, 40 and 54. The guy wants to throw. And here's the thing. We already like Larry Fitzgerald. We already like Christian Kirk. So it's like, if you like these pass catchers, why not like their quarterback? Just makes sense. So I really like that game. Stack it up. I like the other side of that game too quite a bit with Kyle Allen. Not Kyle Allen. What's Keenan Allen? Kyle Allen. The rookie quarterback, or not the rookie, he's a second-year man, but Kyle Allen got a start last year for the Panthers. He scored like 16 fantasy points. It wasn't great, but Arizona's defense is really bad, and Kyle Allen is 4K. Now, do I think Kyle Allen is going to go off for 20-plus points? I definitely do not. I think he's got a much higher chance of hitting 12 points than 20 points. Why is that okay? Because at 4K, it opens up some things like I don't need him to go crazy. Think about a wide receiver that you pay 4K for. If I paid $4,000 for a wide receiver and he got me 15, 16 points, I would be ecstatic. If he got me 12, I'd be like, okay, nice work. So Kyle Allen is interesting in this game as well. Super salary saver, perhaps playable in cash in a running back stud-heavy type of lineup construction. As far as stacks go, I love the idea of stacking. I already like Fitzgerald. I already like Kirk. Let's see. Kyler Murray. We already like Fitzgerald and Kirk. There's Keyshawn Johnson. There's Damiere Byrd. There's a lot of players on Arizona that are getting targets that you can kind of mix into your lineups. So that's how I would do it. I would mix in a couple of, obviously the core play of Larry Fitzgerald. He's been amazing to start the season. I'm just keeping rolling with it until they jack up his price. I think Larry Fitzgerald could wind up, in that mid 6K range very quickly. Christian Kirk looks great. I mean, hasn't had the explosion, but he's getting a lot of looks, so fine by me if he's not going to be high owned. I like that play. On the flip side, Christian McCaffrey stands out for the Panthers. And I'm gonna name some names here. One guy that I don't think you'll see a whole lot of interest in for Carolina is Curtis Samuel, but look at him. Where is he? Here he is, 4,800 on DraftKings. Okay, 13 targets last week, 5 receptions. Disappointed a little bit, but he's getting a ton of looks and he's cheap. Like DJ Moore, so no one wants to play these wide receivers because it's a rookie quarterback. Now DJ Moore, 5,900. Okay, I'm going to pay up. It's a lot of money, but Curtis Samuel for cheap. DJ Moore's been a target machine as well. So either one of these two guys, with Allen or in some sort of stacks alongside with Christian McCaffrey, some sort of stacks with the Arizona guys, Fitzgerald, mix and match, get a lot of exposure to these guys within the lineups that are headed up by either one of these two quarterbacks, Murray or Kyler Murray or Allen, because there's a bonus that will get you off of some of them in other lineups. Like we don't want to have too much exposure to any one of these wide receivers because wide receivers are highly volatile, so we want to kind of get off of that. And the best way to do it is to game stack and team stack. Now, a couple other one-offs. Matt Ryan, I like him a lot here. Just any Matt Ryan to Julio, Ridley. It's been a good mix for the past couple seasons. I don't see any reason why not to go back to it here. Jacoby Brissett could be interesting with kind of Marlon Mack a little bit sidelined. And people aren't realizing, like Matt Ryan's had 2 great games so far this season, 25 points or so. He's 5,700. He's a professional NFL quarterback. He's got great wide receivers. There's no reason to go away from him. He's got not much going on at the running back position. It's a great situation. So I like Matt Ryan a lot. I think he's going to be low owned. And what do we have for ownership here? 1% owned. You can, when you look back on Millie Maker winners of the past, it says like Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, like low owned, and everybody's like, why the fuck didn't I play that? It's because you got caught up in all these other more interesting or more hyped up plays, and no one paid attention. Matt Ryan to Julio, Calvin Ridley, all kinds of stacks. I don't mind bringing it back with T.Y. Hilton from the Colts. I don't mind bringing it back with Marlon Mack if he's fully healthy. There's a lot of ways to go about building lineups this week. You don't have to go with a chalk approach. And I have a feeling that it will not be a chalk approach that wins the whole thing. That it'll be something like, oh man, I wish I played him. Like it'll be a Matt Ryan or Carson Wentz or something outside of what everybody is doing that ends up being in the perfect lineup. It could be a Mahomes lineup, could be a Lamar Jackson, but those will be heavily owned in a lot of different combinations. So it could be something else. So when you're attacking these tournaments, again, as opposed to your hybrids and your cash games where you want to kind of stick with some safety, some upside, high floor, I think ownership is one of the most important things to consider when you're trying to attack a tournament. All right, let's move down the list and talk about running back. And again, each position group has this sort of interesting dynamic of some very high-owned, sort of chalk. Running back this week, there's a lot of chalk at the top. Everybody wants to get on these guys. And then there are some players that look maybe like to be pretty good. A little cheaper, but it's a little scary to roster them, so you got to feel comfortable. Maybe get the FOMO out of the way with your cash lineup and some hybrids, paying up for a lot of these studs, and then do some creative things in your tournament entries that work a little different. I heard some people talking about spending money at wide receiver and, paying down at running back. You got to also understand who you're doing that with, which players, how far down we want to really spend. Because there's a difference between some high upside GPP plays, and I'll point out those guys. Aaron Jones comes to mind. Love that. Marlon Mack, maybe, if he's healthy, comes to mind. Chris Carson. David Johnson. Very interested in David Johnson. Where's David Johnson on my list? There he is. Added him late. Liking him more. Liking him more and more. I already talked about the aforementioned Kyler Murray. 40, 50 targets a week. Crazy offense. Well, David Johnson he hit in the first week. Had a tough week against the Ravens. Got some wrist issue thing going on. If that's not a real thing, he's way too cheap, especially on FanDuel. Much, 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 much more so on FanDuel than DraftKings. DraftKings, he's Austin Eckler price. Dalvin Cook, not that far away. But on FanDuel, he's significantly less than some of these guys. But playable on both. He's a pass catcher. But let's talk about this running back position. So at the top, we've got Barkley, Elliott, and Christian McCaffrey. With Dalvin Cook making a run to try to be in the conversation with these super studs. Now, I can't quite put Cook in that grouping yet, although he scored very well the first few weeks, and he's got a great matchup. But the reason I can't get him there is because these other guys are on the field 100% of the time. They're getting tons of targets. They're getting tons of rushes. They're 25 touches a game. And I'm not quite sure yet ready to anoint Dalvin Cook a 25 touch a game player. So of the top group, Barkley, Zeke, and McCaffrey, let's talk about all three. Barkley, new quarterback. Cool. An upgrade over Eli, no doubt. The new quarterback can run a little bit, so that distracts from the attention that they could fully put on Saquon Barkley. For all intents and purposes, I don't think that'll make a big difference. It is worth noting that Tampa completely bottled up Christian McCaffrey last week, but what are we going to take away from that? What are we going to take away from that? They're good against the run. Am I ready to buy that they're a good run defense? Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Could be. But I'm leaning towards no. And they did get torched. Did they get torched in week 1? No. They've played reasonably good, actually, run defense first couple weeks. But again, the San Francisco grouping, not that impressive. And last week was a Thursday game. I don't know. I don't think anybody can stop Saquon Barkley. And if there's an efficient offense there that's moving the football, it's just going to be better for Barkley. That's really what I'm getting at. I don't think anybody's stopping Saquon Barkley. I doubt it. But the best matchup is Zeke Elliott. It's a smash game. Home team is favored massively. Is there some fear here that, Zeke will come out at some point when his team is up huge and they'll just run the backup out there? Sure, there's that fear, but the team getting up huge, that process will probably could potentially get you 100 yards and 2 touchdowns out of Zeke. That's amazing. Maybe some passing game work. I don't think they'll need to throw to him, but he could smash here. Christian McCaffrey. Love Christian McCaffrey. What's not to like? Now, Arizona, they've played very, very good run defense to start the season. They had a focus against the run, so be aware. Christian McCaffrey completely bottled up last week. Killed a lot of us. Be aware. But overall, Christian McCaffrey's a great play. And the last time that Allen played, Christian McCaffrey had a great game. Now, everybody knows that, and he is competing with a backup quarterback, so keep that in mind. You don't absolutely have to. My favorite of this group is Zeke Elliott. I think he has the clearest path to high floor. Barkley will be the lowest owned. I like that. but they're all very expensive. So let's look at options away from this. Now, in our cash games, we want to get one or two guys from this group. Let's lock in those points and move on. Yes, it sucks. The rest of your lineup doesn't look that great when you have to pay up this high for one or two positions, but we want to lock in the points and let our opponents make the mistakes. You can get two of them in if you use Kyle Allen as your quarterback, but again, you're sacrificing, at least 10 fantasy points, most likely from like any decent, better quarterback compared to Kyle Allen, but it's a doable approach. But all right, so we've gotten off the top group. Dalvin Cook is the next man up. Listen, he's got a very good matchup here. It's the Raiders. They ain't that great. They're underdogs. He's a home favorite. So you got to like Dalvin Cook at home. He's been beasting. Let's see here. Minnesota, 9-point favorite against Oakland. That spells good news for a home running back. Cook, over 20 touches per game so far to start the season, 31 and 29 points. So there's no real reason to think that Cook will do anything but what he's been doing. You can save a little bit over McCaffrey, Zeke, and Barkley. It's a good start to your lineup. Moving down the list, we've got Austin Eckler, who's been going crazy the last few weeks as well. He's going to be high owned. Austin Eckler is not in as great of a matchup as some of these other guys, but he hasn't needed to be in this great rushing matchup because he does most of his damage via the pass. And Austin Eckler is just a guy that's a very explosive pass catcher. 39 points week 1. That was crazy. 24 points week 2. Fantastic. The salary just exploded this week to $7,200. The matchup is not as attractive. Houston is very good against the running back position. So, do with that what you will. Moving down the list, David Johnson, more of a tournament play for me, but he is very interesting. He came out of the game last week, was against Baltimore. Obviously not a great situation, but if you look at the week, he hurt his wrist. If he hurts his wrist again, you're dead. You play him. But if you look back to week 1, 18 carries, 7 targets, 6 receptions, a really nice overall day. And I think that's more what we should expect than what we saw last week at the Ravens. We weren't expecting David Johnson to play well at the Ravens. So it's no surprise that's what happened. I want to talk about Aaron Jones, Aaron. I want to talk about Aaron Jones and the usage he got last week and the narrative, because here's the thing. A lot of people heard that Coach Matt LaFleur said Wednesday that the Packers would like to, quote, even out those touches a little bit, unquote, between Jones and Jamal Williams. Last week, Aaron Jones had 23 attempts, scored a touchdown, passed 100 yards, got 6 receptions in the passing game as well. A very strong overall game for and last week he was how much? I don't even see here. Let's see how much he was. 5,400. Okay. It was a tough matchup. Home versus Minnesota. Now he's got an easier matchup. Home against Denver. A Denver team that hasn't been spectacular against opposing run. It's fine. They're fine. But they're not spectacular and not as good as Minnesota. The coach said we want to mix up the touches between these two guys. What does that mean? We want to make it a little more even. What does that mean? Couple extra carries for Jamal Williams? I don't know. He had 9 carries and 4 targets this past week. Like he got work. 12 carries? Jamal Williams will be out there. It's important to know. He will be out there. So that's why Aaron Jones is not a cash play. Because Jamal Williams will be out there. And if there aren't a plethora of running back points going around in this game, like there were last week when both, Jones was able to manage 28 fantasy points, but even Jamal Williams got himself 13. So it was still like a split. It's just something to keep in mind. Now, another player I like, Chris Carson. Always getting a lot of work. Lots of passing down work, no doubt. But interestingly this week, Rashard Penny came up with a questionable tag, hurt his hammy midweek. So Penny had gotten 10 attempts last week, 60 yards rushing, got a target and receiving game. If Penny is out, up the number of attempts for Chris Carson from his usual, let's say, 20 or so to 25 to 27 attempts. A couple extra targets in the passing game, but a bunch of extra rushes, 6 or 7 or 8. I like that. I do think there's a reasonable chance he will be out, but we'll have to monitor this tomorrow and see what happens. But if he is out, that's a really, really interesting pay down spot at the running back position. Going into the start of the week, I loved Marlon Mack, but he's got that questionable tag going on. And, I can't really trust it right now. I have to see some coaches speak to see what they have to say about it. Mark Ingram, playable, but in a timeshare with a lot of the guys. Could he get 2 touchdowns like he did in week 1? Yes, he could, but he did that on very low volume. GPP only. There's not much else to like at the running back position this week. You're going to hear LaShawn McCoy's name bandied about. And I'm not a big play a running back against the number 1 run defense in the league guy. I don't think LaShawn McCoy, even if he's out there, and even without Williams out there, I don't see McCoy getting, 30 touches or anything crazy like that. They're going to bring in Darwin Thompson or one of these other guys. There'll still be a split. I don't like it. Baltimore defense, very good. So, not my thing. I don't fault anybody for playing him. Frank Gore is another guy. I love Gore's matchup here. Cincinnati cannot stop the run. They've been torched by opposing running backs. But Gore doesn't have a whole lot of upside either. I mean, he doesn't seem like a get you 100 yards kind of guy. I'm going to play him some, but it feels a little more cash game than tournaments for me. I don't think he's got like this big 25-point upside. I also don't think he has a ton of bust in him. Technically, Gore will need to score a touchdown. This is a classic case of a guy that needs to score a touchdown. Let's see if we can get a player prop on Franklin Gore. I'll keep looking for it because I'm not seeing it. Where's my Gore touchdown prop? No Gore. Might not even be a prop for Frank Gore right now, but that's the only way you want to play him, is if he scores a tutty. That's the only place I want to play this guy, so we'll have to see. He's got to score a touchdown, though, because if he doesn't, he's going to get you an 8, a 7, a 6. That's not what we want, and I'd rather have a pass catcher for similar price in tournaments all day. There are so many great pass catchers at cheap prices. But let's get back to this. Right, so that was basically it. After this group, you start to get down to these cheapies, Frank Gore, Philip Lindsay. Not a whole lot of excitement there. All right, let's talk wide receiver, because this is another situation where there are so many good players. There are going to be a couple of too chalky guys who are way too chalky, I think, for bad reason, and I'm going to avoid that like the plague, and then we'll get on to good spots. I don't think this feels like a pay up at wide receiver week by any stretch. It's really difficult to find value, and part of that also has to do with the defense and just not a lot of great value running backs this week, and everybody's a bit of a pay up. So the consequence of that situation is you really can't pay up at wide receiver. You're going to end up kind of looking for bargains, but it works out because that's where all the value is in week 3. So many great mid-salary wide receivers. There's almost too many to choose from. It's crazy. I'm going to go through the top group really quick because, not going to get too much exposure to these guys. Not because I don't want them. Not because I don't love him, but I can't afford him. So DeAndre Hopkins, cool. Deshaun Watson stacks. He's always going to be great. Casey Hayward in coverage. So what? He's too good. Can't nobody stop him. And the Chargers secondary is, for all intents and purposes, not really good right now. They're missing a lot of players. Casey Hayward's their best guy, but DeAndre Hopkins playable. I don't think I'll have a ton of him because I just am not going to have much exposure to that game overall. And I'm not planning on paying up it wide receiver all that much this week. Devontae Adams always has a good game, super consistent, love that. Amari Cooper's the first question mark for me. You know, Miami has one good thing going for him. That's Xavier Howard. He'll be draped all over Amari Cooper this week. I don't really see Miami or the Cowboys needing a whole lot of, Cooper to win this game. They should just lean on the run. Miami defense just not that great. So, yeah. He projects at 21%. I'd rather just fade that ownership. Julio, I talked to you. I do like Julio here. Unlike Cooper, Julio is projecting very low ownership, and I just like that. Give me Julio at low ownership anytime. Kyle Marley knows what I'm talking about. Ryan to Julio. It's been good. Let's keep it going. I don't think this Colts defense is going to be able to stop it. Keenan Allen's another guy I like a lot. He's been peppered with targets. I expect more of the same. Again, nothing great going on with that Texans secondary. So, yeah, plenty of all the Keenan Allen. 17 targets last week? Like, this guy's a target machine. Even, it was a bad game last week, and he still got you 17 points, and he almost got you 21, and that was 15 targets, 98 yards. I mean, he goes 2 more yards, 1 more reception, you're at 22. You get one of those in the end zone, you're at 30 points. So it's exactly what he did the week before. He did 30, and then he did 17, and the difference was the touchdown and the crossing the 100-yard threshold. And he could do that again here. I think that Houston's a good team. They're going to score a lot, and the Chargers will have to keep up. Godwin is strictly a stack with Winston situation. I'm not paying up for someone like Godwin if I don't have Winston in my lineup. Schuster, no. Sammy Watkins, stack with Mahomes. Maybe game stacks with Lamar Jackson. That's basically it. I already mentioned earlier that Watkins coming off 13 targets last week. He's really going to go under-owned, I think, compared to this game and his role on this team and all of that, because he's coming off a dud and everybody wants the new shiny toys, Mecole Hardman and Robinson. But Watkins was targeted the most out of them. He got almost double the targets of those other two guys last week. And when Pat Mahomes is throwing to you 13 times in one game, like, I'll sign up for that all fucking day. Give me that. I'll take it. Thielen, for me, is strictly a piece to include. I don't even have him on my list, but if you're going to play Kirk Cousins, Kirk Cousins is playable, he's startable, he's cheap. If you're going to do that, just use Thielen and Diggs together. Cousins, Thielen, Diggs. And if the trio goes off, you will try to win a tournament with that. That's how I would approach that one. Kenny Golladay, very strong play. Really looked good the last couple weeks. Nothing wrong with this play at all. If you can afford it, again, 6,600 is a bit of a spend up, but there's a lot of viable wide receivers this week. Diggs, just like the aforementioned, Thielen, more of a stack with Kirk Cousins thing than anything else. Although I don't mind Diggs as a standalone. He's come close. He's come close. So inefficient, though. But he'll get there. All right, moving down that list, Hollywood Brown, again, great stack piece with Lamar Jackson. I don't mind him as a standalone core play, but I really probably prefer him in game stacks and team stacks based around that Baltimore offense. Not a Tyrell Williams week for me with Xavier Howard on him or Xavier Rhodes on him. John Brown, a little pricey at $5,500, but this is Cincinnati. They've done a pretty good job of shutting down the number one wide receiver for opposing teams, and so that could happen with Brown, but I'm still willing to take the chance because I like Allen, and I have no one else to stack him with. There are just so many spots to choose from on the slate at wide receiver. We just want to avoid the chalk guys. Keep your ownership low on any one guy. Just spread it out. I don't know how to say this more strongly. Just spread it around in your tournaments. Your mass multi-entering, you're using the Dom. I don't think I'll have more than 10% ownership on any one of these guys. Maybe 15s on the core plays. That's it. So many players could go. I'll have more of Fitzgerald, for example, like a core play like that, but that's about it. Josh Gordon, no more Antonio Brown. Jets can't cover anybody. Josh Gordon is going to fucking beast if they throw it to him. I don't know that they'll throw to him, but I kind of think they will here, so he's going to beast, get some exposure, stand alone. I'm not really using Tom Brady in stacks, but I'll take some Josh Gordon one-offs. Hell yeah. Ridley, been crushing it every single week. No reason to change that. I like him, Ryan, and Julio stacked up. But if I need to use one as a standalone item, it's Ridley. Not because Julio I don't love, but I can't afford Julio in a non-Matt Ryan lineup. Here is last week's hero, Demarcus Robinson. 6 targets, 172 yards, 2 touchdowns. Not expecting that again. Not expecting that. Ross has been fantastic every week of the season. We've been on it. Kind of week 2. We're on it. Can he keep it going? Question mark. It's worth some tournament dart throws. Larry Fitzgerald. Love Larry Fitzgerald. Core play. Getting a ton of targets. Lots of air yards. Looked amazing. Fitzgerald will give you a dud every once in a while. We need that Carolina offense to put pressure on this Arizona offense to continue to keep up, to stay in the game. I think it will happen. I think it will happen. But it's not a definite. It's not anything where we can be sure. But I think it will happen. And Fitzgerald's just priced too cheap for his role at this point. So that's one of the things that I kind of look at and say, you know what, just get on this guy. He's underpriced for his role, and I love a bargain. On the same note, Christian Kirk, a little bit lower. I don't understand this ownership. Larry Fitzgerald only 13%. It's crazy. But that's what I'm saying. Spread your ownership around with a lot of these names. You don't have to be too high on them to get above the market exposure on some of these people. Like I said, if I do the Matt Ryan stack, I'll want a little T.Y. Hilton. He's at home. What's wrong with him? Again, it's hard to fit it all, but shit. If I'm doing that, let's bring it back around. It will create uniqueness in that specific lineup. So I love Fitzgerald, love Christian Kirk, love everything to do with that Arizona offense. They again, 50 throws a game, 40 throws a game. It's just a lot of volume. Mecole Hardman, stack with Mahomes, all good. Don't really like him as a standalone piece, but a stack with Mahomes, absolutely. All right. Going to get into a couple of other names here just that I like a lot. Emmanuel Sanders, been doing great. Super low owned. Shouldn't be. I talked about Josh Gordon. Miles Boykin, I talked about that as potentially a stack with Jackson. Super cheap. But I want to get into a couple of these names that everybody's going to be talking about. And I've been in and out of my list and in and out back. I don't have any more room left for all these names. It's crazy. This never happens. But let's start with Nelson Aguilar chalk. 25% projected ownership at 3,600 for Nelson Aguilar. He's coming off a big game last week. I don't fault anybody for using Nelson Aguilar. You want to use him? Okay. 11 targets last week, 8 receptions. Great. But this is not a guy who has been a volume monster, who has come through in the clutch, or any of that throughout his career. This is a guy who's been a disappointment. He's probably going to see Darius Slay in coverage, and I don't know that a Nelson Aguilar is going to be able to beat a high-quality corner in coverage as a chalk play. It doesn't mean that he can't go off. He can. Doesn't mean that he can't have a big game. But for this price at 24% ownership in tournaments on a bet, this is just something we studied in the offseason, and it said, guys, don't play bad wide receiver chalk, right? It busts 70% of the time or more. So what does that mean? What does that mean? Should I not play him? I got FOMO. I want to play him. If you're in a big tournament, does it mean it's impossible for him to have a great game? If these guys bust at 70%, does it mean it's impossible? Geek said don't play. It's impossible. That's not what I said. What I'm saying is he's going to be 25% owned. There are lots of other great plays that have just as much upside this week, and I'll point out a few of them. Just as much upside for cheap, not necessarily the same price, maybe a little cheaper, maybe a little more, but similar upside without all of that ownership risk that you can get and use in your tournaments. So I'm going to name a few of them here, but quite honestly, I didn't have enough space on my sheet for every single one. How about Deontay Johnson? Starting for the Steelers, they benched Moncrief. Everybody talking about Washington, but it's Deontay Johnson who's the starter. Washington will come in for his deep ball plays. That doesn't mean Washington can't have a great game, but I don't know. I don't know how much he'll be out there. I don't know how great Mason Rudolph's arm is for deep balls. That's kind of like a Ben Roethlisberger thing where he loves to throw that super accurate bomb once in a while. I don't know that Mason Rudolph is that guy. Deontay Johnson's going to be out there almost every play. That's interesting. Demir Bird is a player for the Cardinals. That's also $3K salary, minimum salary. And Miles Boykin, Mac Hollins for Philly. These are some names. Devin Smith going to be out there playing for Dallas. These are some names of players that potentially have as much upside as Nelson Aguilar. The other thing is, for very close in salary, like if you can get to the 4K range. Now, why do we have to get down to the 3K range? Because we're trying to pay up for a very fancy, great spot defense. But if you pay down at defense, you don't even need to do it. Or if you pay down at a running back spot, you don't even need to do that. So I'm trying to avoid it. Valdez-Scantling, decent spot. Deebo Samuel playable. Randall Cobb playable. Curtis Samuel playable. There's so many Emmanuel Sanders, not that much more. Christian Kirk, this whole 5,500 to kind of like 4,500 range. There's so much goodness here. I kind of want to live in that space and not maybe go down. How about Arcega-Whiteside? Again, now it's looking like maybe Alshon Jeffrey will be out. If Alshon Jeffrey is out, I actually think Arcega-Whiteside is the better play. Because if they put Slay on Aguilar, then it's Arcega-Whiteside who will get those looks. I think that either way, you're going to have Mac come in for the Deshaun Jackson snaps, but it's Arcega-Whiteside who profiles more similar to Alshon Jeffrey. So if Jeffrey's out, that's going to be his role. And they'll probably see Aguilar back in the slot where he goes. I'm just saying there's risk with Aguilar because we've seen this guy fail as chalk many times before. I just don't... It gives me a bad tingle. Now, that doesn't mean I won't have any exposure. When I see 25%, there's no way I'm going to have 25% exposure to this guy in my tournaments. No way. If he goes off, fine. If he goes off, this will be a high-scoring slate because at 25% ownership, if you get a $3,600 guy and he puts up 24 points, he's going to break the slate open. So there's a FOMO there. There's a fear of missing out. What's FOMO, Kevin? It's fear of missing out. I say it all the time. I bet like a lot of people don't know what it means. I'm really up on the young people slang. FOMO. I'm afraid I'm going to miss out on the big Nelson Aguilar day. But what if one of these other guys goes off? What if Devin Smith or Mac Hollins or there's any even giving up that guy? It doesn't mean that the person you plugged in is shit. There are great plays between 4,500 and 5,500 on DraftKings. There are great plays on FanDuel. I already did this in the FanDuel video. That's why I'm focused on the DraftKings side for this. But there are great plays on FanDuel at 6K and below. Great plays. There's no need to pay up, and there's no need to eat this crazy chalk. Take one of these other guys. Look at Emmanuel Sanders, 4,800. I mean, he's on the road, but the guy has put up massive points every single week. Even Randall Cobb. Everybody's talking about Devin Smith. What's wrong with Randall Cobb? He's the number 2 wide receiver. You're going to get, for the Cowboys, you're going to get the one good thing that Miami defense has going. Xavier Howard will be on Amari Cooper. Can he stop him? I don't know. But if that guy is being covered by somebody good, who the fuck is covering Randall Cobb? No one. Arcega-Whiteside, as long as Alshon Jeffrey is out, like Arcega-Whiteside, I think I like him better than Aguilar because he'll be way lower owned. And he's a better talent. Doesn't mean they're going to throw to him. I don't know. I'm not able to know that. We don't know who they're going to throw to. I know that if they do throw to Arcega-Whiteside, he'll probably be able to catch it because the dude has mad skills. All right, let's talk tight ends real quick. Crossing an hour. Players Club, what? I still want to talk about Super Draft a little bit. Oh, yeah. I'm not going to leave you high and dry. I know you guys want to talk some Super Draft. Very, very briefly at the end. Very briefly. But tight end position. So we've got Travis Kelce up top. I mean, the dude is no joke. He's a very high likelihood to score a touchdown tight end. Let's go to our Vegas prop numbers here. Love this. Where are my tight ends? Come on, man. There they are. Where are my tight ends? Travis Kelce, 58% chance. You know who's not as high of a chance as I thought? Mark Andrews, only 26%, so that's interesting. But Travis Kelce projected for 19 points via the props themselves on this game. And, okay. 20 points, 19 points. Not that much more than George Kittle. Kittle brings a pretty good projection. But Travis Kelce, about a 60% chance of scoring a touchdown. That's really high. I like those numbers. And that's kind of where I'm looking if I want to pay up at tight end. Now, that said, I generally don't want to pay up at tight end. So who else we got? Well, Zach Ertz is a freaking beast whenever needed. And there's a lot of banged up talent on this Eagles team. And the first place I want to go is Zach Ertz, 5,700, 16 targets last week. How many targets? Eventually he'll get in the end zone. Eventually he'll cross the 100-yard threshold, and he's going to get you 35 points. The upside is massive with Zach Ertz. He's my favorite tight end on this slate. Should get a ton of work. 10-plus targets. Guy had 110 receptions last year. Now, Goddard might play now, and Alshon Jeffrey might play. Let's see what happens. But even with all of that, I think Ertz is the healthiest, best target for the Eagles. Mark Andrews is our guy to pay down to. Baltimore, stack with Lamar Jackson, but probably not a standalone piece. And then your contrarian plays. George Kittle hasn't had that big game yet, hasn't seen the volume of targets yet. Only a contrarian play for me until he shows that he's a consistent target. Evan Ingram, new quarterback, gotta like that. Tampa gets smoked by tight ends. And of course, our pay down option of Greg Olsen. Olsen, new quarterback, but he's coming off a big game. We did see Kyle Allen lean on the tight end position in his first NFL start last season. Some other names that you might be interested in are more only strictly game stack / stack with the quarterback kind of situations for me. If you feel the need to play Jameis Winston, then O.J. Howard is in play. If you feel the need to play, if you're playing the Matt Ryan stack, then Austin Hooper is usable in that type of a stack. But I don't want to go crazy with those guys, and definitely not outside of their quarterbacks. All right, the final and very, very important final factor here: team defense. What do we do? What do we do when two teams are so fucking chalk, but you got to pay all the way up? This is affecting the slate more than anything else this week. These decisions. Team defense. So we have a couple of options. We can pay up all the way up for Dallas. Why? Because last week, if you paid up for the Patriots, they smashed 37 points. They broke the slate open. Now, everybody wants Dallas because it was the Miami terrible offense that helped produce all of those points for the Patriots. But Miami's offense was helmed by the turnover-prone and doesn't give a fuck anymore Ryan Fitzpatrick, whereas now they're switching it up. You've got a new quarterback in play, Josh Rosen. It'll be a little more conservative. I don't know. We could see a whole different looking offense here. Plus, Dallas hasn't exactly been a juggernaut. They haven't exactly been a juggernaut, right? So you can save a little bit on DraftKings by paying down for the Patriots, and I think the Patriots are actually in a better spot. The Jets are rolling out a rookie quarterback or a young kid, a third stringer. You know, the Jets team isn't that good to begin with offensively, and now you have some third stringer out there. It just spells disaster. So if I have to choose between these two spots, I'm going to pay down a little bit and get the Patriots. Obviously, yes, Miami, the worst team in the history of the NFL, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you got to get a couple of shares of that just in case it does do the 37-point thing. But I'm not expecting it. And here's the other thing. We've learned in our studies in the offseason that paying up for chalk defense is just almost always a bad idea. Much like the wide receiver position in cash games or any sort of high dollar games, paying up for chalk, what if they only score 12 points and you had to pay, an extra $2,000 for them compared to some other one that scored 7? So, like, your most likely result with a defense play up top, unless it's the worst team in the world, and Miami is, and the Jets are terrible, and these two teams can predict, there's a reason that they're going to be chalk. But there's also a bunch of outcomes that, they score 12, they score 13, the points, they don't actually smash those defenses, and some cheap defenses go off, and you had to really, really hamper your lineup to squeeze those guys in. So my suggestion is, yes, if you have the funds left over, go for it. Like, don't like use the Vikings at 3,300 and leave 500 on the table where you could have gotten to the Patriots. I'm not into that. Just take the Patriots at that point. But don't force it. If you want to use the Chargers at the min salary, or the Cardinals, who I don't mind going up against a young quarterback either, and they're a terrible defense, but whatever. Or the Chargers are pretty decent defense, but at least they're going off with a guy. They're going up against a guy who gets sacked a lot, so they could get 3 or 4 sacks even in a losing effort. And okay, what did it get you? 8 points? Okay, you're crying over 8 points for the cheapest viable defense, 3 or 4 sacks. It can happen. What if there's a turnover? What if there's a fumble? It's picked up for a touchdown. All of a sudden, it's 13 points for this cheapy guy. So it's dangerous to pay up at defense. It's also FOMO dangerous not to have some exposure to Cowboys or Patriots, but I'm just saying it's dangerous to pay up on defense. And I think in my cash lineup at the end of the day, in order to pay up on defense, I have to basically go from one of the more studly 5K wide receivers down to Nelson Aguilar. That's a decision I kind of have to make this week. And I'm leaning towards putting an extra great wide receiver in my lineup as opposed to just paying all the way up for the Cowboys or something like that. Now, I want to talk about a second thing. This is a week, last week we said, some weeks is like it's value at tight end. This is a week where there's a lot of value at the wide receiver position. Again, all in that 5K, 4,500 to 5,500K range on DraftKings. A lot of it is in the 6,200 to like 5,500 range on FanDuel. And more of a DraftKings thing for me than a FanDuel. But if this week, just this once, you wanted to play a wide receiver in the flex instead of, say, someone like a LaShawn McCoy, who I don't feel that confident in, or even a Frank Gore, who I think absolutely needs a touchdown to make any kind of value. If you wanted to put a wide receiver in there that you think has a good floor, ceiling combination, that has a high target share, like think about Emmanuel Sanders or a Christian Kirk or Sterling Shepard or Will Fuller, who's in a good spot, or any of these guys. I don't mind it. Larry Fitzgerald, of course. Josh Gordon. This whole group is what I want you guys to be focused on this week. Mixing and matching them. And even if you have to use one in the flex, do it. I mean, that about sums it up for the main slate breakdown for FanDuel DraftKings. I did a full video earlier, a lineup construction video for FanDuel, sort of a full video making a lineup and how I will start with a cash lineup and build off of that into various tournament lineups, because some people had said that I'm too focused on mass multi-entry in the Players Cup. I don't think that's what I'm trying to do here, but if people are taking it that way, I don't talk about mass multi-entry. What I'm trying to emphasize when I'm talking about these different approaches is what am I putting in a GPP tournament versus what you might do in a small contest. In a large field tournament, your approach is different than in a small contest. People get this very confused. Single entry. I hear a lot. What about single entry contests? I don't care how many entries are in the contest. How many entries an individual person is allowed to enter into a contest. That is completely irrelevant. The only thing I care about is how many entrants, how many lineups am I competing against? Am I competing against 40 lineups or am I competing against 40,000 lineups? That is where or 4,000 lineups. 4,000 versus 40 is a massive difference. I don't care if it's single entry. There's no difference. If it's a single entry, 40,000 entrant contest, there's no difference between that and a 150 entry contest. None. No difference. The only thing I care about is how many people are in the contest. How many other lineups do I have to beat? If I got to beat 1,000 or 2,000 or 20,000 or 200,000, that's a lot of lineups to beat. If I've got to beat 20, 40, 60, that's not that many. Most people don't play in a 20, 40, 60 entry contest because, quote unquote, it's boring. Those are the best contests. That's what you should be playing the most. At least that's what I think. But, everybody does what they want to do. All right, let's talk about Super Draft real quick. We love Super Draft. I always get, hey, talk about Super Draft. It's not gonna be on the Dom station. It's not going to be something that we do a sheet for. It's the sheet is here. Want to play some Super Draft this week? Play Super Draft. What am I looking? Oh, Kyler Murray's at the top of the list. Look, an adjusted projection, and now look what's happening. Damn. I really like the way the list breaks out, so I'm not going to change this too much. Kyler Murray, 1.65 multiplier. He has more than 20-point upside. What I'm looking for is not just a high multiplier. I'm looking for a high multiplier and a player that I think has some upside. Daniel Jones, you could play him. 2x. He's a running quarterback against Tampa. You could play him. Jacoby Brissett, sure. Kyler Murray, I like him. All of these guys. I'm not going to play a 1.2 quarterback. Why? I think Lamar Jackson can score 35 points in this game, so I might play him, right? But he needs to hit that ceiling, so it's a risky play. Like as an example, if Daniel Jones hits 20 points at 2x, that's 40. Lamar Jackson will need to hit like 33. It could get there. To get to 40. So he could do it, but just be aware. I wanted to point out, I think the main takeaway that I want, you're not going to play Pat Mahomes at 1x. You don't want these 1x guys. The multiplier is all the power. So I wanted to point out some of that. Let's take a look at Zeke. 23.79 points. Okay, 1x. He's the second highest projected. Oh, I'll click it. Well, think about it like this. If you click on Zeke, his ceiling is what? About 30? Okay. But if one of these other guys who's projected a little bit lower winds up going off for 20 points, they can easily pass that. So it's just important to pay attention to it. There aren't that many super high multiplier running backs that I think have a shot. But some of these guys are worth a look. And I do like, I like David Johnson. I like the choices that are here. It looks like, unfortunately, our projection updated, because I was going to say originally Kyler Murray was down this list when he was projected a little bit lower. But, these guys who are coming in with these great projections, playable. If you take a look at the prop-based projections too, and these aren't always accurate. Please don't only use this. Use it as a guide as well. I do like to look at both though. So I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. Based on the props, similar group. Murray's up there. Number 1 though, Daniel Jones. Interesting. I think they're giving him a chance at a rushing touchdown. Like if he can rush one in, he can throw a little bit, he can have a big game. But it's more of the 2x, the power of the 2x, even bigger than anything else. It's the power of the 2x. One thing when you're doing super draft is, try to work a little bit of correlation between wide receiver and quarterback. So if you like a wide receiver quarterback, remember also the wide receiver position is very volatile, looking for touchdowns. So I want a multiplier on a guy who can get me a touchdown. Where's Fitzgerald? 1.5. Love that. Christian Kirk, 1.7. Not bad, not bad, not bad. Get our multiplier guys going. Where's my 2X's? Yeah, Sterling Shepard, 1.6. Okay. How about an Arcega-Whiteside if he has a big game? If he starts, catches a touchdown, 2X. So these are some spots where Kenny Golladay score. He's a big scorer when he does. He can have a big game, but 1.35 is not huge. Manny Sanders had good games. I'm just trying to see who's got a nice multiplier that we can mess with. Most of the best stuff is going to come from this top group, but these numbers are very close together. So, like I said, I'd rather have a 2X guy with a low projection that if they crush their projection, here's Curtis Samuel, a guy I like a lot. I love this play, right? Why? Because he's got an almost 2X multiplier, and they're kind of projecting him a little bit low. But if he scores a touchdown, he's going to crush this number. And he'll crush all of these guys. So just something to keep in mind as you're doing Super Draft. To look at the multiplier and then consider the ceiling of the player. What's the best case scenario? Well, best case scenario for Zach Ertz is, he can smash and get 28 points, and he got 1.3, he got 40. Great. Kelsey, though, he can smash and get 30 points, but it's going to be 1x. Mark Andrews has smashed every single week, 30 points a week. I mean, that'll get you with 1.445. So that's where you want to be. So a little quick Super Draft breakdown.
Yeah.
That's going to do it for Week 3 Players Club.
To all the people that lived above the
ton of content this week, all the notes, multiple videos,
and all the niggas in the struggle,
incredible projections,
it's all good, baby.
everything. So we're all set up. The Domination Station, for those of you interested, the new stacking system is back up and running. I'm going to try to do a video tutorial of that too, but I may be on content overload here. But I'll be using it this week. You guys can too. You've seen my tutorial for it a couple weeks ago. Make sure you have correlation stacks checked off at 1. You could do 2, but not 0. 0 is a problem. Don't set that to 0. I love the new stacking system though. You guys gotta try this on the Dom Station. Make sure you clear your cache. And I'll be in my channel answering questions, doing my thing as always, as much as I can. Remember that tomorrow is game day. I will not be looking at your lineups. I can't do it. I'm not able to. I will not be answering DMs tomorrow. I don't answer DMs on game day. If you send me a DM, I'll know that you didn't listen to the Players Club, and then I'll be even less likely to want to answer. And I'm like, they couldn't be bothered to listen and watch the video. Please don't. So let's crush it this week, everyone. I want to see more DFS Army names at the top of the leaderboards. Trust your gut. If you have something that you like to do, if you have an idea, a stack, just do it. Trust in your gut. We all watch the same football games. Try to break these down. Try to get us on the best positions. But more so, I want to talk strategically about the approach, staying off the chalk at pass catcher, spreading out your exposures a little bit, attacking different types of contests the right way. There's nothing more important than that. Understanding the difference between cash, small, tournaments, and large-scale tournaments. Keep that in your mind as you're making your lineups, and you're going to do just fine. Let's kick ass this week. Good luck, everyone.
And if you don't know, now you know, nigga.